guns and money.
Good evening, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. I want to thank everybody for joining us for our Tuesday night live program that we do here every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, streaming not only on YouTube, but Facebook as well. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. For those of you who maybe have joined us for the first time, I saw a couple of comments where people are saying, what is this about? Who is this guy? Well, my name is Scott Reich. I am a practicing criminal defense attorney. I have been doing it for 27 years and basically been doing it for 22 in private practice. Prior to that, I was a judge advocate in the United States Marine Corps, where I was a little prosecutor for a little bit of time and then a defense attorney as well. So when it comes to talking about criminal law after 27 years, I think I have a pretty good idea of what we can expect, what each side is thinking throughout this process. And that's really why we started this program, was to be able to explain the legal system to you, maybe a little more in depth and in detail than what you're going to get on the evening news. Let's face it, you turn on the evening news at night. What do you get? Well, you get the local sports team, won big or lost, maybe some weather, the three-legged dog story to make us all feel well, some more weather, some more sports, and that's really about it. Nothing regarding crime, true crime, legal system type issues in the evening news, or even, frankly, even in newspapers these days, if they rarely even exist. But that's what we are here for, and we want to thank all of you for joining us. So it is Tuesday Night Live, so we will be answering your questions. And although we don't ask for them, if you do the super chat, it does get highlighted and much easier for me to see. So if you really want your question answered, please let me know. Now you're probably saying, hey, okay, Scott, so maybe you kind of know what you're talking about when it comes to criminal defense, since you've done this for so long in both state and federal court. What case are you going to talk about? Well, I think the one we need to talk about today, first of all, is Lori Vallow. Okay. This is obviously the case that's going on in Idaho. And Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell are both charged with conspiracy to commit murder as it relates to the death of Lori's children, JJ and Ty Lee. Chad Daybell is not the biological father for either one of those children. And Chad Daybell is also charged, as is Lori Vallow, with the death of Tammy, his wife of, I think, 25 years, I think is what they were married. And then she mysteriously died. And thank goodness Lori Vallow was there to console Chad Daybell. And what's the word I'm looking for? They were able to consummate their marriage to each other in Hawaii some 7 days after Tammy died. It's a love story made in heaven, true romance for sure. But in all seriousness, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell are accused of murdering the children and the wife for remuneration, financial gain. Okay, excuse me. Excuse me. And that financial gain was going to be basically for the insurance policies for old Tammy, and then the Social Security benefits that it was anticipated that Lori and Chad were going to get regarding the deaths of JJ and Ty Lee. But their plot was foiled, and they would have got away with it if it weren't for those pesky grandparents who said, hey, we want to see JJ. Where's Ty Lee? Why is nothing being done? Because frankly, I don't think anybody really cared. And, then you got Lori and Chad who are just thinking the world is coming to an end. And, there's some sort of super powerful being and they can control people. Weird, crazy stuff. Ultimately, they get charged. Children are found deceased in Chad Daybell's residence, not his residence, but in his yard. Now, we've taken a trip out there to old Rexburg, Idaho, and we went by the property. I would find it very hard to believe that you did not know that somebody was digging on your property. Okay. It's not that big of a property. And Frank, I don't know. Do we have that queued up? I can't remember if we did before. He's going to see if he can find it. Okay. We took a little trip out there. We looked around. We flew the drone over the property, and it's just not that big. So you think, if somebody's digging holes out here, I probably know it, right? It's not like you have, teenagers like, oh yeah, we were digging a fort out here. We're going to cover stuff up. No, not the case. All right. Needless to say, Lori and Chad have been charged. First, they are charged with basically the failure to produce the children. Then we're charged, once the children are found, they're charged with basically desecration of the bodies because the bodies are found, JJ and Tylee are found in various states of desecration that took place. And to make things worse, then the government out there charges them with the conspiracy charges, and here we are. But before they can get to the indictment, the arraignment on the indictment for Lori Vallow, her attorneys, then Mark Means, who has since gone away because he had no experience doing not only a death penalty case, but he'd never done really a criminal case to a trial. So he gets basically removed for some ethical issues, some representations to the court. Mr. Archibald and the other guy, I think his last name is Mr. James, they take over the case for Lori Vallow. She goes off to the state hospital to be restored to competency because she is, not competent. She thinks that what's the word I'm looking for? She thought she had special power. She thought she was something special indeed. But as it turned out, she was just crazy. Okay. But they restored her. I'm assuming lots and lots of drugs. And then there you are. We're in court today. We have a trial date set in the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell matter in early January of 2023. You say, my gosh, Scott, that's only 4 months away. How long has this case been going on? Certainly they're going to move for a continuance. Well, I certainly hope they do not move for a continuance, because we all have been waiting now, coming up on, 2.5 years now. This case has been going on 2.5 years. And yet there wasn't until the other day a stipulation filed regarding the consumptive testing of DNA in the case. 4 months away. Okay. And I don't want to worry anybody, but these things take time. You just don't rush down to the local DNA testing office and get a test. Well, they're kind of busy. They're kind of backlogged. And I get it. You're going to say, oh, Scott, these labs don't do anything until they know a trial date. Well, we've known a trial date now for months. I get the prosecution has a duty, but they could have sought to get this issue resolved much, much earlier. And now we have an agreement that, we're going to try to get a sample for both of us, but if not, we'll test it. And if we can't decide how we're going to test it, then we'll come back to the court. Okay, well, unless this is going to be done within the next couple of weeks, we're getting really close, because then there's whoever doesn't get their test done say, my expert needs to take a closer look at this, and that could result in a delay. I hope Judge Boyce on this case, a man who sets a status date to set a status date, will say, no, we're going to trial. Let's roll. Let's rumble. And we'll see how that goes. Now, before we go any farther, I'm going to have to ask Frank a quick question, because it appears as though I am not getting anything on my little screen here, Frank, and I'm not sure why. Let me see if I can pull this up again. I don't think that's the one I want. Why is it always me that has problems with this stuff? Why is it never Frank has problems with this? Okay, now since we're entering something here. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, let's
go back.
See. Yeah. Come on in here, Frank. Yeah. Come on in here, Frank.
Oh, you need to log
I was just log in. Okay. Sorry about this. I don't know why it was working before and then it stopped. Not sure why, but that says that account exists. Anyway, we'll just try to read the chat up here. I'm not sure why that's doing it. It says that count exists already. I get that. StreamYard. Anyway, let's see if enter studio. Let's try this again.
Is that one? No.
I'm not getting anything in there. That's very odd to me. Anyway, maybe you can click on those super chats so we can answer those questions.
You can go to the, oh yes.
Double click it. It should go up on the screen. Sorry, folks. A little bit of technical difficulties here. It happens. Scott, please talk to the aspect of the ineffectiveness of this judge. Well, Laura, ineffective. Now, Judge Boyce, he has been assigned this case. He, as I understand it, was a recent district court judge. Prior to that, he was a magistrate. And prior to that, I think he did a little short stint in private practice, and then he was maybe a prosecutor or something to that effect. But he's the judge now, and that's just the way it is. I think he wants to be diligent. I think most judges want to do a good job, and they want to be very thorough. As you saw in today's hearing, he heard argument, which was really no much more different than what was already on the pleadings, so to speak. They both sides kind of regurgitated their briefs. This issue could have been ruled on the paper. I get the judge is basically trying to say, we will, I'll give you an opportunity to see, anything else you want to add. And then today the court said at the end of it, I will take it under advisement and issue a written order. Okay, not a whole lot exciting happening in that regard. The Judge Boyce, seemed to basically telegraph saying, hey, I get the prosecution said this wasn't timely filed, but given the nature of the case, the complexity of the case, the amount of discovery in this case, I'm going to hear the motion by the defense team. Now, Robert Wood, in this particular case today, he usually seems very much prepared. Today, maybe he's just having a bad day. We've all been there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not throwing stones. And maybe he didn't have much more to say than what he's already said, which is basically, Judge, we can do this. We don't need to go back to the grand jury for these two issues. One, as it relates to the counts, the way that people have charged it, that there was a conspiracy to commit homicide, murder, and this grand theft. And then the other counts was basically, the other motion was that the government, according to the defense, needs to take the case back to the grand jury and present the aggravating factors to the grand jury so that the jury can consider them. And what that comes out of was a case out of Arizona many years ago, Arizona v. Ring. And it was a death penalty case. And a lot of states many, many years ago thought, hey, you know what we need to do? We need to speed up the death penalty process. And the way to do that, so we don't get these jurors who are on here that are going to be swayed by emotion and feel sorry, we need judges to do it. So a lot of states, Colorado was one, Arizona was another, they came up with this whole 3-judge panel thing. And says, hey, the jury can find him guilty, but when we get to the penalty phase, we're going to have judges do it because they're not going to be swayed by emotion. They're just going to look at the cold hard facts, apply the law to the facts, and impose the death penalty. Well, needless to say, when people, don't want to die after the government has said you're going to die, guess what? They appeal. They appeal the United States Supreme Court, hence the Ring case. Supreme Court said you can't make this too simplistic. We get what you're trying to do, but you can't do it. And for the death penalty, a jury has to do it, not judges. And what came out of that and its progeny is several things. That if you are going to charge anything that increases the sentencing, you have to charge it, present it to a jury, and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay. It's just, it makes sense, frankly. And I can't remember the case off the top of my head, but it was a case that, God, what was the name of it? Ugh, drives me nuts when I can't remember all those cases that the Supreme Court has written. I just can't remember all of them. But the general principle from which it stands is that, like I said, if there's an aggravating factor, so let's say, let me give you a simple example, and then we'll go to the death penalty case. If you have a client or a defendant, you have a defendant that is charged with, let's say, selling drugs, and you think one of the aggravating factors, which is going to increase the punishment, was that the drugs were sold within 100 feet of a schoolyard. And on top of that, not only was he near a schoolyard when he was distributing these drugs, he had a firearm. So at that point, the Supreme Court says, you got to charge all that, because that's going to increase the sentencing. The judge just can't do that on the back end. The jury has to decide. Okay. So the charges would be that somebody distributed drugs within 100 feet of the schoolyard, and they also had a firearm. When they went to trial, they would have to prove that the defendant sold the drugs. The jury would have to make a special finding that they were within 100 feet of the schoolyard, and also that they had a firearm with them, which are aggravating factors. And then you go back to the statute at sentencing, and they say, oh, look, they did all these things. Now your sentence is increased. And that's really the argument that the defense is making in this particular case. Ring did not specifically address the whole issue as it relates to aggravating factors, to say, hey, we're going to kill your client for these aggravating factors, right? That there was remuneration involved. The children were less than a certain age, under 12, or that they were under 18. I'm sorry. And so what they're saying is, hey, you need to go back, make the grand jury find that there is probable cause as to this. The government, Mr. Wood, cited a case in Idaho that had already previously addressed this. It was a death penalty case. And they said, you don't need to make that finding. Idaho Supreme Court says it's good enough. It's good enough for me. Well, obviously the thing that the prosecutors aren't thinking about, and probably neither will the judge, he'll say, hey, my Supreme Court here in Idaho says you don't have to do that. But guess what? There's another say in the land as it relates to that issue, which the court hasn't addressed. And there's no guarantee that they would, but that would be the United States Supreme Court. It certainly involves a question of constitutional concern, could affect lots of cases throughout, the United States. It's something the Supreme Court could possibly say, yeah, we'd want to take that issue up. So based upon the precedent in Idaho, the court says, I think he's going to say, you don't need to do that. Our case has already said that. I'm not going to make the prosecutors do something that's not required under the law. I got to look to my judges on my Supreme Court and let somebody else worry about the other Supreme Court down the road. And that's the same thing, the position that the prosecutors is saying. The other issue is that even the judge noted today, I think it was on counts 1 and 3, the whole conspiracy to commit murder, how they charged it. They conspiring to commit murder and grand theft. And the issue, the judge said he caught it. Lori Vallow's attorneys, and it wasn't Mr. Archibald. I think his name is Mr. James, the one that looks like Chris Farley. I mean, that guy is like a spitting image. And I'm not trying to be mean. And I'm saying this as a compliment. He looks like Chris Farley, the comedian. Anyway, he's like, Judge, I've been doing this for a long time. I think he said 20 years. All I do is criminal defense. He says, I was a prosecutor for a little time, but I never did a grand jury. But, he made it sound like somehow the grand jury came up with these charging documents. Yeah, no. Okay. If anyone's ever been to a grand jury, how many of you? Let me tell you, it's not like you think. If you're selected for a grand jury, it's just like being selected for a regular jury at a jury trial, except you get to come back usually once a month for the next year, and you hear all the cases where an indictment needs to be brought to see if there's in fact probable cause. So you all sit in there, you all show up. Let's say it's every Tuesday at 9 a.m. You show up, and the attorneys will have the time block. Say you have 5 hours. You have from 9 to noon in the morning, and then from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. So each prosecutor will have maybe an hour of your time, or 15 minutes, 10 minutes. It doesn't take long to establish probable cause in a simple case. You put the detective up. What did you see? What did you hear? Who made the identification? That's it. Boom. Probable cause. Grand jury doesn't write that up and say, hey, we think you should charge this. They don't know what it is. So the prosecutor says, hey, just to help you out, you've heard what the detective say. We believe these are the appropriate charges. Why don't you all just go ahead and sign right there at the little X? And we'll take that true bill indictment, we'll file with the court, and we'll get an arrest warrant for the defendant. That's it. The problem here for the prosecution is that the grand jury, assuming that they are no longer impaneled because they don't go forever, then the grand jury would have to come back, or they'd have to get a new grand jury, present it all to the grand jury all over again, so that they can establish probable cause and they can clarify this charging decision. Because the issue that the court seemed to be focusing on was the issue that the defense seemed to be focusing upon. This is going to be confusing for the jury. Obviously, Mr. Wood disagreed and said this isn't going to be difficult for the jury. They know what it is. The grand jury got it. They conspired to commit murder and steal money. That was the object of the conspiracy. And conspiracy is a crime in and of itself. Okay. So on a charging document, you can be charged with conspiracy to commit murder, the actual murder, and then the theft. Okay. Or you can make it complicated and charge them all at the same time. But then you start getting into definitions. Well, did they conspire? And we talked about this a little bit on the show that we put out today. Okay, conspiracy. Let's say I want to rob a bank, and I go to Frank and I say, Frank, my trusted, hardest working man and show business producer. If you can't trust Frank, who can you trust, right? And you go to him and say, Frank, you know what we need to do? This YouTube thing isn't working out. This law practice thing just isn't working out. Let's go rob a bank because, hey, that's where the money is. And I'm like, wouldn't that be nice? And we kind of chuckle about it. Yeah. And that's it. We never do anything. There's no conspiracy there. Okay. But if I say, Frank, I've had it up to here. I know I'll probably get caught, but I just need a little bit of a lay down. I could use relaxation. I got this thing going on my side. Not sure, but I'm gonna get some free medical care. So let's go rob a bank. And he said, is that really what you want to do? Well, he's like, yeah, maybe we could go do it together. Right. And so we go, and Frank says, fine, I'll go get the car. And I say, fine, I'll go get the masks. I'll get the pellet gun. Let's go. Okay. That is a conspiracy. The crime of conspiracy has been completed at that point. It is irrelevant whether you actually succeeded in actually doing something, but you took that step to actually do it. And once a conspiracy starts, there's only one way you can get out of a conspiracy. And that's basically, you have to let the world know. I just want to let everybody know that Frank and I conspired to do something illegal today, but I am withdrawing. I have had second thoughts and I want to withdraw. That's the way you get out of a conspiracy. That is the only defense for a conspiracy, other than there was no conspiracy. Yeah, I mean, the other defense would be, sure, Frank and I were joking about it, but he was going to drop me off at my office, which is right next to the bank. And he went and got the car, and I went and grabbed my briefcase, but there was no mask. There was no gun. There was no conspiracy. We never consummated the deal, so to speak. So, but the prosecutors in this case kind of lumped everything together. And they want to basically say that there was a conspiracy to do this and this. But then he clarified and said, well, there are 3 conspiracies. I don't know if y'all caught that when he was making his argument today. There were 3 conspiracies. Conspiracy, I think, as it relates to Tammy, JJ, and Ty Lee. But then you had the whole money thing, which is different. They lumped it all in there. So that theory of prosecution was a little confusing to me, and I was a little surprised by Mr. Wood. Usually he is spot on. I like Mr. Wood, and don't get me wrong, we've all had those bad days in court where you think, I just can't get it out. My tongue is just not making sense. It's not connecting with my brain. So, you know, but I just don't think he was on his game necessarily today. Maybe he was relying upon, you know, his brief that he had written. And that seems to be the thing. We file all these briefs and then we wind up having a hearing on it. If there's not an evidentiary issue for the most part, unless one party requests it, the judge could probably rule on the paper. And, but they didn't do that. So, and our judge in this case, getting back here to our, we got a big old chat here. Let's see here. Scott, I was just a juror. Let me tell you that there is so much confusion with lawyer people about the charges. Thank goodness they sent the paperwork with the language to convict, or not, so that we knew the answers they wanted. That's Laura Dubois. Yeah, it can be confusing. The law that goes back to the jurors, the jury instructions, you know, they read them out loud to the jury, and then the original goes with the 4-person, and everybody else usually gets a copy as well. And, you know, the interesting thing is it can be confusing. I've had many, many cases come back where they say, what does this word mean? This doesn't make sense. What define this word? Usually it's definition type issues. And where I practice, basically what they say is that, well, if the legislature hasn't defined it, you just use your everyday common sense definition of what a word means. And you're like, well, let's define it. Like, let's help give them the answer. Usually it helps. But I always like to, if it's been defined somewhere or in case law, we try to give that to them to avoid those issues, because that's normally what we're arguing about as well when it goes to the jury. But yes, it can be very confusing. And I've never been a grand juror, but basically it's the same thing. You think, I mean, the people, you know, there may be a lawyer in there or something, but 99.9% of them don't have any legal training or background. They're just kind of following the the roadmap that the prosecutor is giving them and say, sure, we'll sign it. Sure. And don't forget, I mean, a lot of people that get indicted are found not guilty. So although somebody thought there was enough evidence to charge somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have enough evidence for proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is obviously the legal standard at a jury trial. Probable cause, much lower standard. Would a reasonable person believe that a crime has been committed and that the subject, the defendant to the indictment has been, may have had something to do with the crime. That's it. A reasonable person believes the crime is committed and that the defendant may have had something to do with it. That is it. Okay. Very low standard. But yes, I understand, Laura, there's lots of confusion. And, you know, the lawyers usually try to break that stuff down. You know, I always do when I do a closing statement. I'm like, you know, all right, let's talk about the facts. This is what the government brought you. This is what they didn't bring. And because you can consider what the government didn't bring when you consider the proof in this particular case. And then you always like to talk about the instruction. Usually there's 1 or 2 instructions that really jump out. Obviously, the proof beyond a reasonable doubt instruction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not a vague, imaginary, speculative doubt, but a doubt that would cause people to pause in matters of great importance to themselves and say, there's enough reasonable doubt you could drive a semi through this thing, right? Then there's usually another instruction, depends upon what you know, your theory of the case is. Maybe there's instruction you want to focus on. But if that's the point, you're going to be arguing it to the jury. So anyway, hope that answers that question. But yes, it can be Is it McGill? Isn't it simpler, Occam's razor, to eliminate conspiracy, though that may lead to a separation of charges, or to say at least conspiracy too? Good question, McGill. I don't think they want to. I don't think the prosecutors want to get rid of the conspiracy charge. I think they just drafted it poorly and break it up. And sorry for the inconvenience for them to do that, but that's probably easier for something to do. Because remember, they could present the exact same evidence, okay, and say, here's all of the evidence is going to come in. We believe that children were killed, whether by Lori or Chad or Alex Cox, the brother, or somebody else, right? And then the prosecution could get to the end of the case rested, going to jury charging, the jury instructions, and they're saying, Judge, we want a complicity instruction. Okay. And I've had this done to me many, many times over the years. Okay. Usually where there's two defendants charged, but they didn't charge conspiracy. And they say, hey, it doesn't matter. We've charged first-degree murder. I don't need to charge conspiracy. Let's say, for example, the charges, they went in to rob a gas station and somebody died in the commission thereof, right? You are a complicitor. Doesn't have to be charged. It's a theory of prosecution. And it says that if you aid, encourage, assist somebody in the commission of an offense, you are guilty just like you did it yourself. Okay? That charges a conspiracy. Conspiracies oftentimes complicate things. Sometimes prosecutors want a conspiracy charge for evidentiary rulings. Okay? Particularly if they're going to have a joined trial. Because normally, what somebody says, somebody has to come in and testify to that in court. That's an admission by a party opponent. But if there's somebody else that the government can show was involved in the conspiracy, those statements can come in. Now, we don't know all of the statements that the prosecution has, all these emails, text messages that they may have got from all the phones and other electronic devices. So let's say they think that Alex Cox was a co-conspirator in the case. If they can establish a conspiracy, then all statements by co-conspirators, whether charged or not charged, come into evidence in furtherance of the conspiracy, and it's not hearsay. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense? Right? So you have Lori and Chad that are charged with conspiracy, Alex Cox, who's dead. If the prosecutors can show that there's a conspiracy between the three of these, even though Alex Cox is dead, not subject to cross-examination, but if there's a conspiracy exists, those statements can come in as a statement made in furtherance of the conspiracy. Now, it's not all statements the guy makes, only statements made in furtherance of the conspiracy. Okay. And it all comes in basically as a mission, as a party. I mean, it all comes in against the defendant, and it can be used against all three at the same time, even though Alex is dead and not subject to cross-examination. Right. Got a confrontation clause issue there as well. So, and that's the reason why I sometimes pause, and not that I know everything, but let's see, show of hands, how many people said, oh yeah, let's do some co-conspirator statements because those will be admissible versus if I just, charge murder and I charge everybody under a theory of complicity. No, probably not. Sometimes I'm not sure the prosecutor has thought that all the way through as well, because it normally doesn't come in unless there is a bunch of co-conspirators in the case, and it doesn't come up all the time. It doesn't come up all the time. So we'll see. Gene wants to know, Did the prosecution screw up? Maybe. The answer is only if the judge says they did. If the judge tells them you got to go back and clarify this charging decision that you made, then I'd say they screwed up. Then the prosecution has to go back, convene a new grand jury, assuming the other grand jury is still not impaneled, which I'm assuming they're not, and present basically the case again to the grand jury and come back with a superseding indictment, which the superseding indictment replaces the indictment that came before them. Pretty straightforward. Okay. So then we got Gleeful Me. The defense attorney didn't sound too sharp to me. I mean, he wasn't tearing it up, I guess, but he seemed a little more focused, but that's just me. Everybody's got their own style, what they like. Susie says that Lori felt those kids were in the way of her life with loin fire. Tylee was one of them. Yeah, that's no doubt about that. But let's talk about what really matters in this entire court appearance. Lori Vallow's attire today. Did you notice she put a little rouge on the cheeks there? It also appears as though she's still somehow being able to make it to the beauty salon. There were a couple. Yeah, let's pull those pictures up, Frank. Let's take a look at this. This is Lori Vallow leaving, although, you know, I don't know. I can't really tell. It looks like she's got a little bit of some gray roots coming through there. But yeah, she got the gray rouge. You know, they do that in jail, like with M&Ms from the commissary, various other things to, you know, make the rouge there. You know, got to look good when you're going to court. Who does she kind of look like? The Joker, maybe. But she was happy. Look, she's smiling there. Thanks for tucking me into this police car. This is kind of cool. Get my own trip. Oh, smile for the cameras there. There we go. And in court as well, she was smiling and kind of, you know, laughing, so to speak, not like out loud, but it looked like she was, you know, smiling. And basically while her attorneys were seated there, sitting down, what have you. But I'm like, what's so funny? Because it's just the attorneys talking. But she seemed to be very, very into it. And, you know, I don't know. And it looks like she had on, I couldn't tell if it was an actual, looked like some sort of gray blouse as well. You know, normally when prisoners go to court appearances and they're in custody, they show up in their little orange jumpsuits, their little black and white striped jumpsuits, if that's what they're wearing. Idaho apparently lets everybody wear what they want to court. Remember Chad Daybell, when he shows up for court, he looks like he's you know, going out to go door knocking on a Mormon mission. He's got his little white shirt on him, a little tie. Yeah, so we'll see. Let's see here. Sharon, I just pray the prosecution dots their I's and crosses their T's, and we don't want them to be able to maneuver to anything less than they will be convicted. Yeah. Let's hope they get it right. Let's hope they get it right. And this is what I always say. And because, you know, people always say, oh my gosh, the defense did such a terrible job. They failed to, you know, they tricked the people into finding the defendant not guilty. I've said this once and I will say it again, ladies and gentlemen. If you think that somebody got off a case, guess who you should blame? The prosecutor. The prosecutor, the prosecutor, the prosecutor. Okay. They have the burden. They have the facts. They have all the resources of the government. And if they blow the case, don't blame the defense attorney. The defense attorney is doing his job. What it really means is the prosecution failed to do his. Okay. And if prosecution thinks they're going to court to go to trial, guess what? They have an obligation, an ethical obligation to say, I can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. So Teresa wants to know, hey, does Chad, again, info from Lori's hearings? Yes. In fact, had the DNA issue been before the court today, Chad would have been there as well with his attorney, Mr. Pryor. But since they worked out this stipulation, they did not. Kind of interesting issue, in all honesty, because, the court made a big deal. These cases are going to be tried together. All the motions hearings are going to be tried together. They're going to be tried together. Well, even though the defense for Lori Vallow filed these motions regarding these issues related to how they're being charged, if the court rules in favor for Lori Vallow on this issue and the prosecution has to go back and supersede, they're going to have to do the same thing for Chad as well. So I'm a little surprised that Chad Daybell, through his attorney, hasn't filed a similar motion or a motion to join. Now, if the court rules in favor of Lori Vallow, Chad is going to get the benefit of that as well. So, yeah. I was like, you're so funny, Scott. Love the way you're explaining conspiracy. What conspiracy? I have no idea what you're talking about. There's no conspiracy here, right? I always like, sometimes you get up, ladies and gentlemen, there's a conspiracy. There has to be an agreement. And usually that's like the cooperating witness. Oh, you said you were part of this conspiracy, were you, right, when they're on the stand? Where would I find this conspiracy written down? Where would I find it memorialized? Oh, there wasn't one. Oh, okay. Well, as my boss always used to say, if it isn't on paper, it didn't exist. Where you don't have it? Mm-hmm. No, just kidding. I mean, I have done those. I'll ask those kind of questions. Just a little sarcasm in court, kind of helps accentuates the point that you're trying to make, because most people get sarcasm. Some people don't. Okay. But of course, they'll say, oh, we're not going to write it down. I do hereby agree to conspire with Frank, the hardest working man in show business, to rob a bank on our way home tonight, right? No, that's not going to happen. I mean, conspiracy can be a wink and a nod and a, eye wink, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, right? Yeah. Throw out the conspiracy. I say leave it in, but go fix it. That's my thinking, Delina. Worry about the money part later. People who lost their lives deserve justice. Let's see here. Gene, in my opinion, Rob Wood is nervous. John Pryor has dirt on him, possibly. Well, maybe we'll find out if there is any dirt. And frankly, if there is dirt, I think we should have a right to know. I think people in the state of Idaho have a right to know. If their prosecutor is not squeaky clean, we should know. If there's something that could be manipulated, we should know. That's why we should have access to all the motions that were filed trying to disqualify the prosecutors in this case. And remember, as a lawyer, you just can't say anything, even in pleadings, right? You have to have a good faith basis for it. So if the basis is you're saying the prosecutors need to be disqualified from this case, I would think as a voter of Idaho, I would demand to know. It's always about the money. That's right. Well, at least I'm getting through to somebody out there. Wendy says, it's not confusing. Scott, why are you making this so difficult, Scott? Sorry, Wendy. I get it. But some people will be confused by it. I assure you. Some people on the jury would get confused by it, right? And don't forget, when the defense is up there doing, their lawyer stuff, what are lawyers doing? They're making the simple very, very complex, and the complex so simple. That's what lawyers do to get their information across. Yes, Dawn, I agree. Smash that like button, right? Subscribe if you haven't, like if you do, leave me a comment below, and go watch our videos from the last couple of days. Okay, I think they're pretty good. Now, another burning issue we need to talk about. We got a couple of things. First of all, I want to tell you how exhausted I was yesterday. Okay, this total side tangent. But for those of you who are very regular watchers, I had a court appearance on the other side of the state. And normally I try to jump into Crime Talk 1. But the mechanic said, hey, that stuff that you want to get done because of the trip you're going on, we need to get it done. We'll get it done today, Monday. So I drive. I leave the Denver metro area yesterday about 4 p.m. Thinking, all right, I got a 4.5 hour drive, probably 5 hours, but that's okay. That's okay. I get past Vale and they close Glenwood Canyon. They divert me to a pass. And as a native of Colorado, I've never been on this pass. Okay. But let me see here. Maybe Frank, I don't know if you can see this, Frank. I don't know if you can send that. So they sent me on this pass in Colorado. There's a couple of them there. Videos. It's dirt. I'm going over mountains in the rain on a dirt road that's muddy. At some point, it's single lane highway, single lane going down is mud. And if you go off the edge, you probably die. Then I got to take another scenic view thanks to Google. Yeah, it took like 7 hours to get there. Same thing last night. They closed the highway once again because I am coming back and there's flash flood. And part of it in Glenwood Canyon, the little river gets a little low. I mean, it's right there by the river and it comes up, you get washed away, dead. Don't do that. So I got to have dinner in Glenwood Springs last night. Went to I think it was called Colorado Company. Very good. Had mussels, had a filet. It was amazing. Great place. Highly recommend it. All right. But we digress. Let's get back to Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. And then, of course, we can always talk about that pesky affidavit for the search warrant that will be heard this Thursday. As to whether it will be released. Why? Because the press, those pesky reporters, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and other news organizations say, why can't we have the affidavit? And I think it gets kind of interesting there because, well, remember the initial representation, or at least the storyline that was fed to everybody was, hey, this is about getting these documents that maybe haven't been put back to the White House in some 18 months are in danger, grave danger. Frank, do we have that clip? Grave danger.
And did you give an order to Colonel Markinson as well?
I ordered Markinson to have Santiago transferred off the base immediately.
Why?
I felt his life might be in danger once word of the letter got out.
Grave danger?
Is there another kind?
Exactly. These documents they were in grave danger. Grave danger, even though the property is protected by the Secret Service. They go and they execute the search warrant. They maybe pilfer through a couple of things, go through Melania's drawers or unmentionables, perhaps. And apparently today we learned they took 3 passports. At first they said, we don't have any passports. And they're like, yeah, you do. And then the FBI was like, we're sorry. We'd like to return your passports. But I'm sorry. I thought they were only there to collect items of evidentiary value related to documents marked secret, top secret, and confidential. And don't get me wrong, like I said, this is not political in any way. We try to call balls and strikes when it comes to this stuff. What does the government say? Judge, please do not release the affidavit because it could release information on other ongoing investigations. Well, what? I thought you said that it was just about recovering these documents, that apparently there'd been some going back and forth and they couldn't get it done and what have you, right? So this is why we need, obviously, transparency in all things, because when people actually have to make a representation as an officer to the court that, judge, this is the reason why we're doing something, well, it has to be truthful. And you can see they're already trying to fudge a little bit. Don't get me wrong. If the government thinks that former President Trump committed a crime, by God, go charge him. Okay? Go charge him, but do it. But just like we talked about today, Alec Baldwin, whether you like Alec Baldwin or not, the man's been waiting 10 months for there to be some sort of decision. either make a decision or not. You're either going to have enough evidence to go to trial or not. Your case is not going to get better the longer time goes on. So if you got it, charge it. You know, the aura of a criminal investigation over you can be just as bad as actually being charged, because people, well, I don't know, is he going to get charged? Is he not? It's going to affect business. I don't know. It affects people's lives. It affects people's marriages, relationships, things of that nature. So, yeah, I don't know. Charge him. If you got it, charge it. If you don't, let him know. Let the world know. Susie, question. This may sound minor, but I feel they should have gone back and tried to dig up the second pet cemetery to see if there really was a raccoon buried there. Susie, have I got something for you? Roll clip.
Which one?
The drone footage. Now here we are, just down the road here from Chad Daybell's property. Okay, there's the little road. Flying a little drone. There's Frank and I down there underneath the car. That's going due east. All right, I think it's going to turn back around here.
Yeah.
Here we go. As you can see, you know, it's populated. There's people there. There's neighbors literally right across the street on two of the corners. Okay. Now, as we wait here for some incredible drone flying footage, here we go. Bzzz. Now we're flying right down the road here. This is heading west. The little building on the right, that is like a little barn structure right there on Chad Daybell's property. All right. So hopefully this goes a little faster. I thought we had more footage that was closer to the actual property.
Okay, let me find it.
Anyway, as you can see, and hopefully we'll get the right footage there, but that property is not that far from the road. And there's a house just across the street. And on the other road, right there by that intersection, there was people out there as well. And so, Susie, I get your question. Like, why didn't they dig it up to see if there was someone else out there? Right? They want to be able to refute anything that they, being the government, wants to be able to refute anything that Chad and Lori would say is, you know, oh, it's completely plausible. I was out there, those pesky raccoons. Pesky. Right? Well, we dug that up. We didn't find any. They want to be able to do that. So I get that. Let's see here. Good question. Mullet Mayhem. It's not about being smarter or dumber. We just forget that people aren't familiar with certain terms. I find myself doing it, and I'm in healthcare. I totally agree. If you don't use the terms, you're not familiar with them, it doesn't mean you're smart or not smart. It just means you're not familiar with the term. And that's the beautiful thing about our legal system is that people from all walks of life, there's no requirement that you have you hold a PhD or some sort of graduate degree. You know, I've had jurors, people, didn't graduate from high school. You know, they meet the qualifications, 18 years of older, live in the jurisdiction. They can, they understand English, can read it, speak it, write it. That's all basically the qualifications are, assuming they don't know anybody on the case. That's it. And I'll be honest with you. Some of the people that are on the jury that have no real advanced, great formal education are smarter oftentimes than some Yahoo that can have multiple degrees. You know, I've seen some people that have been MDs on a jury, and you're just scratching your head like, what are they thinking? I don't know. Give me common sense, everyday people on a jury. Okay. They will figure it out. I guarantee it. Brianna Laundry. Scott Reich for governor. Yeah, no. Could you imagine people? I would not make a very good politician because I just can't help myself. I just blurt out, the truth, the facts. I think it's a history of being obviously a criminal defense attorney where I'm the guy that gets to talk about the elephant in the room. I get to ask the question that everybody wants to know, but like, ooh, I can't. Would that be politically incorrect to ask that? I don't know if we can do that. I'm the guy that gets to ask those questions. I can't imagine why it would differ now. And oftentimes, sometimes it gets me in a little trouble now because even then I just can't help myself. Like I gotta know. And sometimes I can look, it didn't embarrass me, but sometimes people are embarrassed that I would ask a question at all. But I'd be a terrible politician. I just speak my mind. And don't get me wrong. I know, people in politics, some of them very nice people, some of them very nice, wouldn't trust them to balance my checkbook, let alone run, be responsible for billions of dollars in a state budget, let alone the federal budget. Don't want to do that. No. I met somebody that is in a state legislature once that was a bartender. And the reason why this legislator ran for office, because basically no one else was going to in this little not very populated area. But if she was in the legislature, she got health care. That's right. That's why she did it. And then they put her on the Joint Budget Committee to decide how they're going to divide up. Scott Reich for president. Oh, wouldn't that be a hoot? I would last a week. Can you imagine all the terrible things they do to everybody? They would come after me so hard. I can only imagine. Let's see here. Did I miss a question here? Let's see here. Awesome. Okay. Trish. All I want to prize that the accused usually gets for a speedy trial. Okay, let's see here. Sherilyn, I'll add to the other replies that the accused usually goes for a speedy trial when they're hoping there isn't enough to convict. They don't want to give more time to find more evidence. Moments in trading. Nailed it. And the other reason why you also go for a speedy trial? The prosecution won't be ready. Okay. Some of my greatest victories, we're talking not guilties in first-degree murder cases. They're like, well, you're going to move to continue, right? Nope. We're ready to go. I remember showed up his first-degree murder case. It was beautiful. I was like, Judge, ready to go to trial. Well, Judge, we need time to find a witness, and it's going to take another week or 2 weeks or so. Of course, there's only 3 weeks on speedy trial. Mr. Rice, are you prepared to have your client waive speedy trial? No, Your Honor. She's like, well, my docket's full. And I'm like, okay. So she tried to jam me. I'm like, it's a homicide case. I'll move my other cases around. Let's go. Not guilty. Okay. Another one had a case, speedy trial. Things are getting close. Prosecution. You can feel, well, anything we can get you guys? Anything to discover? Yeah. Why don't you send me over the discovery on that other case that's completely irrelevant, but we're going to ask for it. And they dump it on you. And it's like 3,000 pages. Like, well, you going to move for continuance? No, I'm just going to be here till the wee hours of the morning going through discovery, making sure I do my job, but I don't think it has anything to do with my case. So let's go. Boom, not guilty. Okay. So yes, speedy trial, you got to be careful. But if you demand speedy trial, you got to be ready to go. Otherwise you lose credibility with the court. Like, I thought you wanted a speedy trial. I do, Judge. Let's rumble. Let's do it. You don't show up in the morning. Well, Judge, I need a continuance. I really didn't think that they would ready, but now it looks like they're ready. I need to continue. You can't do that. If you're going for speedy trial, you go forward. Okay. Let's see. Sharon, are the conspiracy charges needed to tie more people more than the other person? Yes. And the reason why I think they need that, and like I said, I don't have all the discovery, but I'm just trying to speculate here a little bit. And I hate speculating, but I think I'm making a very good educated guess here. Okay. And that educated guess is they need the information from the phones. Okay. And they think being the prosecutors, probably believe that they have enough information to say that Alex Cox, the brother of Lori Vallow, who I think most people agree, maybe he's probably the one that actually harmed the children. So if they got his text messages there and they can't come in because he's dead, how do you get that into evidence? You don't. It's not like you can just go to the phone company or the people at the FBI and say, "Oh yeah, here's all the stuff on the phone." It doesn't just miraculously make it into evidence. You have to authenticate it. Basically, say, "Yeah, someone familiar with the document, what it is." But just because they say, "Yeah, I took all these documents off the phone," they just don't come into evidence. That's hearsay. You have to have the person that wrote it. Well, if the person that wrote it's dead, how does that come in? It doesn't. Unless maybe you do the conspiracy to say that those statements were in fact involved in a conspiracy, and therefore they're not hearsay, which makes them admissible once the court makes a preliminary finding that a conspiracy existed. Now, that's the way I've always done it where I practice, both in state and federal court. I'm not going to say I know exactly how the state of Idaho is going to do it. Okay. But if my client's charged with a conspiracy, guess what motion I'm filing? I'm filing a motion under 801 D2E to let me know who statements does the prosecution think is going to come in. Okay. And 801 D2 is an exception to the hearsay rule, which is basically co-conspirator statements. But then the court will say, well, we're not going to take these one by one. Let's do them now. And I always like to say, judge, particularly a state judge, is not that familiar with it. Maybe it's their first conspiracy case. And I say, hey, judge, you know what? Let me show. I'm going to attach here and give to you and the prosecutor. Here is a chart that the federal courts really find helpful when it comes to deciding co-conspirator statements. And it basically says, here's the statement that the prosecution wants to get in, under what theory it's going to be admitted, by whom they think they're going to get it in, and the scope and limitations, right? Helps the prosecution figure out their case as well. Not necessarily a bad thing. Helps the defense figure out what's coming, right? So yeah, it's just, I'd be filing that motion, but of course we don't get to see any motions that are filed in Idaho unless the court gives it the blessing, but everything has been, rather restricted. I mean, I could tell you, I could come up with probably 25 standard boilerplate motions that I would file and litigate in a case like this. And we've seen nothing. And I hope, God, I hope there's a bunch of stuff filed because this is a death penalty case. Okay. And I understand, I will be the first one to tell you, each and every case is different. You can have the simplest little case and you can file a bunch of motions. That homicide case that I told you about, where there were no motions. Client didn't make a statement. Don't need to litigate that. It's all right. It was a simple case. It was an assault gone bad. Let's go do this thing, right? Well, maybe a gunshot or two, and maybe a car, but let's go. Let's do it. Let's get this thing over with. But we didn't file any motions in that case. Zero, none. Okay. So I don't necessarily hold it totally against them, but it is a death penalty case. And if you lose, the people that do the appellate review are going to come back and say, you were a terrible attorney, whoever's representing anyone in these type of cases. Yeah, I mean, you did a great job. We know you put your heart and soul into it. But at the end of the day, yeah, we think you suck because you lost. And so here's a release. Can we take a look at your files because you suck? Oh, you didn't file motions? Then they're going to bring another attorney and say, I would have filed more motions. I think it would have been a tool for discovery. All those types of things. Very, 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 very interesting to see. Let's see if we can go through this stuff here. Man, it goes by so fast. Justine, hope Lauren Chad get what they deserve. Well, let's hope justice is done. Yes. Oh, good one here, Chloe's mom. I hope this doesn't end up like Barry Morphew's case. Yeah, I don't think that would be the case. Let me see here. I don't see that super chat on mine over here. Yeah, Jane. Can you hit Jane's? This might sound silly, but why does she get to have her roots done and Curly and I are in the county jail? I understand the clothes to wear, but roots? James Blonde 007. I get it. I thought when she had come back from the state hospital, I thought for sure she would have gone all natural, all gray, all the time. And then she looked like she had just gone to the beauty salon. Now, it's not uncommon when there's a female defendant in custody to show up for court. Somehow I think they are a little more lenient on the rules, right? They let people shave before they go to court, that kind of thing. They want to make a good impression. I'm not sure how they get curling irons and stuff into the jail. I'm assuming it's with the consent, like, oh, hey, probably going to be the last time she gets to curl her hair. When all this is said and done, let her do it. If that's what makes her happy and it's going to make our lives a little easier, we're going to have to deal with crap, let her do it. But yeah, I mean, she looks so happy. She looks so happy out there in court today. I mean, she's probably thinking, this is great. This is like a field trip. And they're all here to see me. That's what she was saying. Now, she didn't really say that. But you know what I'm saying. Clumsy clever. It appears they just don't want to go back to the grand jury. They don't want to, because then it looks like they messed it up, right? But they should have got it right. I don't know what the judge is going to do. I really don't know what the judge is going to do on the charging issue. I don't think they're going to make him do it for the aggravators, but on the issue of the conspiracy, I think they may have to do that. Scott, thank you, Maria. You are the best lawyer explaining channel of all of the ones out there. Well, thank you. And hopefully that's why people come here and listen to us. And here's the thing. If I don't know the answer, I'm not going to just make it up and lie to you. I'll tell you. But the reality of it is, like I said, I've been doing this for a while. I'm actually, a practicing attorney. When I did yesterday's show, I had been in court all day. I had spent most of my time in the jail that day, trying to negotiate and get something done in some cases. And I literally got done. I was like, hey, Sheriff, I need to do something really quick. Is there anywhere I could, like a conference room that I could sit around and do this? Yeah, I did it. And we knocked it out. But the point is that this is what I do. I still deal with it on a daily basis. And, these are all issues that come up in court cases every single day. Oh, somebody doesn't like her smile. Yes. And that stupid smile. Yeah. Didn't recognize her. I know. I mean, seriously, if she was walking down the street and let's say she didn't have her body armor on to go to the car and shackles, you'd probably think she was just a regular mom walking around Idaho, doing whatever she wants to do, but not exactly the way it turns out. Brennan Tube, wouldn't the prosecution just want to make the charges, make sure they're correct and no issues to avoid any complications of risk with getting a guilty verdict and an appeal? You would think so, right? Brennan Tube? Exactly. You would think so. Hey, you know what? You would think the prosecutor say, it's going to be inconvenient. I get it, Judge. There's an issue here. The court's concerned about it. And if the court's concerned about it, then I'm going to be concerned about it because we want to make sure we do this correctly. I understand it's going to be a pain in the butt, but let's make sure we do it correctly. Because part of your job as a prosecutor is anticipating those issues. Even the defense side, they saw this, they spotted it as an issue. The judge had some concern with it. So you already got 3 people in the courtroom, the defense attorneys and the court saying, I'm a little intrigued by your charging decision here. Huh. Right. I had a case once. It was a really, 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 really bad homicide. We're talking dead bodies. We're talking dead bodies everywhere. Bloody mess. And when I say a bloody mess, never seen photos with so much blood in them. It was a mess. Okay. And it was an indictment. It was a cold case. And there was a charging document that came down. And then the prosecution said, well, we're going to go back and fix this issue with they charged the wrong statute that was in effect at the time. And they came back and they fixed it. So you had the indictment Then you had a superseding indictment. And the superseding, look up the definition of superseding. It means to replace, not to join, supplement, to replace. Common language. Plain, simple definition of the word. And I said, Judge, here's the indictment. This is the superseding indictment. These have all these charges. This one has one count, but they superseded. So we're only going to trial on one count. And I preserved that thing. The appellate counsel was like, oh my God, you preserved this thing. It was the best thing you ever did. The plain definition, it supersedes. It replaces. It goes up to the Court of Appeals. Well, oh, God, we hate it when you're right, Scott. But your client is an SOB. Did you see those crime scene photos? It was a bloody mess. Go fix it. If I was giving advice to the prosecutors, I would say, go fix it. Don't let it become an issue on appeal. Okay. I know no one's going to blame you now for having to go back and redo it. Better dot your I's and cross your T's now, and go from there. Because if you lose later down the road, they're going to hold it against you. KZ, Scott, what was your take on Lori's demeanor in the court? Well, she was kind of smiling and looking, I thought, well, that's weird. It's like her attorney talking, making jokes with her. I don't know if she saw something or if somebody was whispering something into her ear. I don't know. So, I mean, I didn't think she did anything inappropriate. She was just kind of sitting there looking, trying to look as normal as possible. I didn't see anything that completely offended me. She looked like she was just trying to be normal. Shirley, the DA filed earlier regarding the consumptive test. I agree. Right after the murder charges, Pryor objected and quite frankly argued they couldn't do anything until Lori was restored. Yeah, I think they're wrong on that one because her case was stayed, but his was not. They could have brought her attorney in and said, okay, I understand the case has been stayed, but you're still going to have a say in this, but we're not going to hold this up until the rest of, she gets restored. What if she never got restored, but yet speedy trial was still ticking away for old Chad, right? You got to solve it. You got to solve the issue. You just can't blame it. Well, he objected. Well, that's what attorneys do. They object to the other side. I object. Okay, well, then if we can't decide, guess what? We'll go to the judge. That's what judges are there for. In most civil cases, it's the attorneys, they file a lawsuit. Court comes out with a case management order in a civil case. You go conduct the depositions. People are professional officers of the courts. If there's a disagreement, then you go to the court and say, Judge, we can't agree. But you don't wait until the very, very last moment and then try to say, oh, we didn't come to you sooner, Judge. I don't know. Full of herself. That's apparently to Anne. I can't disagree. I mean, it just depends on what is, people's thinking. What is Lori's black ring? I didn't see it, but I've seen several people comment about it. I don't think it's one of those rubber things. I think it's what the prisoners make in jail. They literally take the material from like socks and they pull it apart and then they like weave it together over a little piece of paper. And I've seen rings made out of that. Just speculating, but we'll see. I'm not sure. Scott, I still don't understand conspiracy. I failed miserably. All right, Pam's back. All right. Hopefully didn't miss anything. Let's see here. Squeaky. Let's see what this says here. I think Lori got all spruced up and fixed her hair into a Shih Tzu puppy style because she thought Chad was going to be there, just like the rest of us did. Unfortunately, her Chad bailed. Squeaky wheel. Good point. I don't think the two they've been together, what, once, maybe twice since they've been in court. Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Yeah. All right. Can you believe how quickly the time goes by? And we really only talked about one subject tonight, and that was Lori and Chad. That's for sure. Scott, talk about the DNA issue that didn't get talked about. Well, I got their motion. We talked about it the other day, the stipulation for the consumptive testing. Like, wouldn't this just have been easier? Because I've been explaining this going way back when they said, we're going to do consumptive testing. Okay, so here the parties agree that the samples listed in the state's motion for consumptive testing may be consumed by the state's lab to determine if sufficient DNA is present to create a DNA profile. All right. So the lab may get there and say, there's not enough here to create a profile, or they may say they're remote. Okay, good enough. Thanks, everybody. We're going to agree they're going to test for DNA. In the event sufficient DNA is available to create more than one profile, the DNA sample will be split between the parties for testing, and each party may have the expert of their choice test their respective portions of the DNA. Amazing. Test it. If there's enough, we get to keep it. Perfect. Both sides can do their own independent testing. Whew, this took months to decide. This is what normally takes place. In the event sufficient DNA is available for only one profile to be created, the parties agree the state lab shall halt any further testing, and the parties will reconvene at that time to determine who should conduct any further testing. In the event the state lab determines there is not sufficient DNA to create a DNA profile, the parties shall reconvene to determine what, if any, course of action to take regarding the samples. I don't know what to say. I'm literally like, really? Okay. If there's enough DNA, that's really what they wanted. The prosecution has really agreed to nothing here at all. Well, if we can do enough for 2, then you can go do your own. But if we determine there isn't enough, we're going to come back here and be right at the exact same spot. This agreement only took 8 months to come up with. I wonder how long it's going to take for the rest of it. Okay. We're talking about some DNA on a tool handle, I think an axe or something, axe or pick, something to that effect. And if there's even enough DNA to create it on some tape that was found in one of the body bags, as I understand it. So hopefully that answers your question, but they really didn't agree to anything. And what's the time frame on this? Is this going to be done this week, next week? Is this going to be a rush job? Who's going to determine if there's not enough consumptive testing? I think the prosecution should have just gone to the court, and the court's going to say, listen, prosecution, you can do your testing. We presume it's going to be consumptive testing. If it's not, good to go. Give them, a sample, the defense a sample, so they can test it themselves. If it is going to be consumptive testing, defense, you better have your expert there to observe. Don't come in here and say, you're not going to do it. Prosecution, you give them enough notice so they can have their expert there. Give them 14 days notice. If they can't make it in 14 days, you go ahead and test, because we got a trial to do. Now, I'm not Judge Boyce, but that's what I would have said. This is a wishy-washy agreement where nothing is agreed to actually get done within a certain time frame. If a bank in Colorado gets knocked off tonight, can they arrest you? Perhaps I'd be a person of interest. I'm not sure this. On Trump, why do you think related to the guy named Jeff? I don't think I mentioned that. Maybe it's something going on here in the conversations that I didn't know about. Okay, good question. Assuming if the defense wins this motion, does Lori and Chad walk out of jail until the next grand jury? No. They have the document as charged. They would just go supersede it, which basically means to change it, to fix it. Supersede, replace the one that's there. What are you on, dude? You're saying gibberish. Ooh, sorry, Pete. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but wouldn't be the first time people looked at me saying, why? What are you talking about? I usually try to think I'd get the point across pretty good, but hey, you never know. Maybe I'm missing the point. Question, squeaky wheel. Do any of these proceedings involving Lori really mean anything, since Judge Boyce has already laid groundwork for a reversal on appeal. He violated her right to a speedy trial. Yeah, they still got to go through it. And hopefully it is considered preserved, because I think it will be an issue, no doubt. For those who don't recall, Lori Vallow got restored. She comes back into court. She enters the pleas of not guilty. Originally, she doesn't want to waive speedy trial. So the judge basically says, well, I'm going to find that, we can try these cases together, even though her speedy trial would have been, I think October or something. We'd be coming up on it real soon. But then the judge says, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to extend it out. No, I think it was actually 4 months. It would have been August sometime. It would have been really, really fast. There's no way the prosecution would be ready. And there certainly would be no way that the DNA at issue would have been tested if the court had granted Lori Vallow's request to go to trial within 6 months. Not trying to say things are not looking good here, but just trying to think, why are, should we start getting worried just yet? I don't know. And to the point now where I'm sure the AG is like, I don't want to touch this thing. I don't want to touch it. I mean, trial in 4 months on a death penalty case. Yeah. Lee here. What if Lori says nothing to anyone, even her own lawyers? Nothing. Zip. Nada. At that point, the defense could more than likely file a motion basically for competency, because the defendant has to be able to assist in their defense. And one of the things for competency is they're unwilling to do that. Now, it's one, if they're just being stubborn, or two, they just can't assist because they got that. They are just off in la la land, or they're not doing it. We'll just have to wait and see. Jen Lowe, yeah, that pass was pretty cool. It was interesting, to say the least. All right, it's that time. Well, if you'd like to continue the conversation, guess what? We are going to jump over to our Patreon in a few moments here, and so we'll see everybody there. I hope you all join us. If you haven't become a Patreon member, please do so. Super reasonably priced. You get a lot of bonus stuff for it. You get all this cool stuff like trial guides and evidentiary issues. We give it to you for free after you pay like $5. But I'm telling you up front, but wait, there's more. That's right. You get to be a part of the conversation where you can actually call in and we ask the Magic 8 Ball. I think the Magic 8 Ball question tonight may be something along the lines of whether the judge is going to release that pesky affidavit. We'll just have to wait and see. That's going to be a big issue. We'll talk about that as well. All right. Hope to see you all in just a few minutes on our Patreon side. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Crime Talk.